Okay, welcome back. So when we last left off, we were talking about the abduction of the Sabine women, Nicholas Poussin, and talking about the structure of page compositions. And so that leads to kind of this discussion of looking at a number of examples and just seeing how each one does similar things but in different ways. So in this case, this Watteau painting is also thinking about structure, but in a much looser kind of sense. We can see definitely some thought about the diagonals and a little bit about the divisions of vertical and horizontal. But the play on those diagonals is much more kind of much looser, like more willing to meander on and off of those lines in a very kind of slow and graceful kind of way. Uh, and if we look at this Titian, we see a similar thought about diagonals, but um, more like a more like a spring or an arc, like a bow. That there is this corner to corner diagonal, but it's being stretched as an arc in a curve, and that stretch, that arc, creates kind of force and energy and movement in the composition. There is also a lot of thought about this diagonal as well. Um, anyway. We have talked a lot about the Baroque this last week and a half, but I want to talk specifically about Baroque composition in general, and this particular painting by Rubens, because it's so is a great embodiment of Baroque composition. Baroque composition is very structural, although less likely to use, perfect centered triangles than Renaissance composition, tending to use diagonals and also diagonals that would go, like if there's a diagonal from this corner to that corner, then also organizing things on perpendicular diagonals to that diagonal, like from that corner to this diagonal line in a perfect T shape, and similar from that corner to there. Right? Can you see what I'm saying right there? I should have drawn that out. So there, it is very structural, but at the same time, Baroque composition is very much about these kind of um, dynamic curving, slightly sometimes languorous, but still these flowing arabesque lines around and pushing around those structures, which creates that kind of balance in Baroque composition between them feeling structural and very fast versus then slowing down and having more of a sense of discovery and I don't know, a play off of that kind of strict consonance. Now, we have talked about the Raft of the Medusa multiple times. We just in the last lecture talked about it in terms of value. Um, but if you start thinking about it in terms of structures in the composition, about the corner to corner diagonals, right? And the implied triangles that it creates, and how it relates to where the half line and the third lines are, um, you really start to notice that it is very much a very kind of carefully planned out composition. Here are some different analyses. I put this 1010 version of Guernica, or of the Raft of Medusa, up just as a um, just for fun. Anyway, getting back, so you can see in this one the double triangle, right, and um, how the structure of the composition is very kind of tight, but then at the same time, how within that is very much about these implied lines, these big sweeping curves that move around those those structures. That leads us right to Delacroix, and once again, another big, giant, but off-center triangle. This is a very different use of triangular and corner-to-corner compositions compared to where we started with the Renaissance, because it's much more active and dynamic, but it is still very structural. Okay, and then the last part, we'll talk more about how artists can use these same kind of structures and forces to create tension. But that is the end of part 2.